Welcome to Deadly Youth, a podcast that shines a spotlight on the diverse stories of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people, uplifting the voice and stories of our First Nations community and enabling pathways for culturally inclusive and respectful future collaborations, whilst facilitating broader community understanding and awareness of First Nations history and culture. This podcast is filmed on the unceded lands of the Bunurong people of the Eastern Kulin Nations. We pay our respect to any elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people listening. Hello and welcome to the first instalment of Deadly Youth. My name is Georgia and today I am joined with Bayley Mifsud.
Hi, yes, that is right.
Cool. So thank you for coming. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. To start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are your mob? Where did you grow up? And what's kind of your story?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, first of all. My name is Bayley, but I'm more well known by Marinda Gunya, which is my Aboriginal name, which I got when I was 16. Marinda means beautiful and Gunya means spirit, which is really, really nice. My parents and elders picked that out for me. I am from Warrnambool, so I was born in Warrnambool, raised in Warrnambool, which is on Gunditjmara land or Kuray and Peak Wurrong land. I moved to Melbourne when I was 8. My dad started coaching AFL, so my whole family moved to Melbourne. So I grew up in a really sporty family, and I've lived here on Wurundjeri Wurrung land ever since.
So I personally have seen your artwork around, so I know you're quite renowned for what you're creating. Can you talk a little bit about your platform, what kind of art you create and what the process is behind that?
Yeah, so I am a contemporary Aboriginal artist. I have been a full-time artist now since May last year, which is really exciting. So I got to a point where I couldn't do art and my full-time job, and I'm really grateful that I've been able to make it, now my life, my career. I paint the stories taught to me by my elders. So I learnt Aboriginal art when I was 5 years old, so really young. And it wasn't until COVID again that I picked it up when I had lots of free time. I grew really organically on social media. I'm 25, so still young-ish. I grew up in a time where social media, it was just kind of everyone had Instagram, and I knew how to use it and really just utilise that platform. I think 50% of my customers come from Instagram, which is crazy still. So just really utilising social media to promote what I'm doing, which has allowed me to grow my business to now make it a full-time career.
So you mentioned telling the stories from your elders and being taught by them how to do art. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process? Yeah,
so I was with my family at Brambuck. So Brambuck is a cultural centre in the Grampians. If you haven't been there, I think you should. It's beautiful. It's 3 hours from Melbourne. It's an amazing place that we would always go maybe once a month, I would say. And we would always just immerse ourselves in culture, whether it be dance, music, art. And I remember sitting in a room once with our elders, and they showed us all these kind of like little squares of possum skin cloak. Well, they said, we're going to be putting all these on our cloak. So they sew them all together. But you all get like one possum each to do art on as a family. So we sat down, we learned the symbols, and then we all did the drawings, and then they like burn it in. So I first learnt the art to do our broader family possum skin cloak. And that's for like ceremonies and different events. So you have one per like family group and then one per like your family. And they've all got kind of different art on them, which is really beautiful. So that's when I first learnt them.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned being contemporary. What, I guess, is different about that? What's contemporary about your artwork?
Yeah. Besides the visual of it, obviously being a lot colourful, traditionally Aboriginal art was done in ochre, which is, like sand, dirt, water. It looks very different because it's on canvas and it's also paint and it's colourful. So that's one element of it being contemporary. And the other is the stories. I do paint my stories, my people's stories. However, when I have a business reach out to me, like the Glen Ira Rap, I'm telling their story instead of it being an Aboriginal story as such. There's still ties to Aboriginal land and community within that story, but it's the broader kind of business or organisation story. So that's the other contemporary element.
And you mentioned ochre and dirt. do you still practice with historical instruments such as that, or is it more so just paint?
Yeah, no, I never learnt ochre and dirt.
Okay.
I saw it. My uncle would do it, but he would always hand us the grey leads or the pencils, and even like on the possum skin, how we did it in grey lead first. That's just what we'd learnt. And I suppose as now there's colourful, easier things to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how long ochre would actually last, in a room, because there also weren't rooms with lighting and heating and all these different elements. So, no, I've never actually painted. Besides on body, when we do ceremonies, you use that to paint on your body, which we had at our naming ceremony. But I haven't actually ever put it on canvas.
Okay. So going back to the fact that you are currently a full-time artist, what has been your favourite piece you've worked on, collaboration, like opportunity that has arisen from this career?
Yeah, I think the Cadbury Roses would be, and that is a very recent one, and I don't want any business I've worked with to listen to this and say, oh my God, it wasn't mine. However, I think that the national footprint that has is just really cool, from, just being an Aboriginal person, or, I think if I was, a young girl in the supermarket, and if you look at it, the scale of it, which was done deliberately, it's so bold, and you will walk past it as an Aboriginal person and go, oh my God, that's an Aboriginal artwork, look at the story. I think that it's also not a place you usually see Aboriginal culture, the supermarket. So I think that was also really cool because it's in a completely new space. And it also tells a really sentimental story of Nan, which is also really cool. So that would, probably if I had to pick one, be my favourite.
But I mean, you obviously have had so many incredible opportunities, so
Yeah.
it would probably be pretty hard to pick one. So sorry for putting you on the spot for that one.
Right.
So COVID was kind of when you re-engaged in your artwork. When did you realise that art was more than something that you just loved and found passion in, and actually held the potential to be a career?
Yeah, it's really interesting because my dad's very old school, like most parents. It's a very kind of typical Aboriginal dad in the fact that it's like art's not a job. And I feel like in school it's also kind of, it's just fact, right? They don't teach you that art can be a job. And I had a full-time job, and it was a very senior job, and I had that from I was 21 years old. So I was always really senior in my career, but then art took over. I was earning more doing art, and I loved it way more. And then if I got home from a bad day at work, I couldn't then paint. And then once my job didn't end up being, what I loved it being for 4 years, I got to the point where I was actually like, it's impacting my art. So then, I quit my job. And the day I quit my job, Cadbury called me. It was really weird. It was like an hour after, and I was like, how do you have my mobile number? And it was just like meant to be. Yeah. And I'm no more spiritual than the average person or average Aboriginal person, but I was like, it was meant to be. Yeah.
You can I feel like the opportunity knocking on your door really does go to show like that's where you're meant to be. Like you've made your impact in your other full-time job that you had where you were quite senior, and now it's time to take the next journey. So that's really cool. Yeah. I guess like talking about how your dad's quite traditional, and as society we don't often perceive art as being a job. You're kind of pushed to do university degrees, TAFE degrees, like trades and stuff. Have you experienced any shame or feelings about that on what your family would perceive? Also like stepping into contemporary art as well?
No, my family are very supportive. I haven't had any I haven't faced any issues. My broader community are also really supportive. There aren't many Victorian Aboriginal artists as such, and I think because of my experience working with Indigenous affairs in corporates and now working on artworks within corporates, within Indigenous affairs, like for RAPs and Reconciliation Action Plans, RAPs, or other things, I'm kind of still somewhat playing that role. But my family have been nothing but supportive.
Yeah, and I think that's also like a really good message that it's okay to try new things because your family loves you and they'll be there to support you. So I think if anyone's listening to this and feeling like stepping out of like the realms of what's expected for them, it's a really good reminder that your family and your broader community are typically going to be there for you. Yeah. Can you talk us through like your cultural upbringing and how that got you to where you are today?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I was talking about this the other day with someone, and I've never really reflected on it until I was talking about it the other day. To my little cousin, who said, "Do you remember having to go do that?" And I said, "Yes." And she was a bit younger than I was, so she didn't remember it as vividly. But I'd go to school when I was in like year 9, and all the girls are like talking about their sleepovers and that. What'd you do? And I'm like, skin kangaroos, like complete opposite. Complete opposite. And I grew up and I went to a Catholic school in Melbourne. But then on the weekends we were doing traditional, as I said, at Brambuck, we were going and hunting, and the men were doing dancing, because traditionally the men do the ceremonies, and my little brother was doing it all. They were eating raw kangaroo after we'd just seen it be skinned. It's just not I was vegetarian for 4 years after that. It was a bit traumatic. That's why we were talking about that conversation, because she asked if I was still a vegetarian. So, it was really different to what I was, my broader world. And I don't know, I thought it was way cooler. Like they painted their nails, I skinned a kangaroo. I was like, what am I, what's going to get me further in life maybe? But yeah, it was just really different, and I'm grateful for that. At the time, I was maybe like, Dad, do we need to be doing this? Yeah. But now my cultural knowledge is a lot stronger than a lot of people around me. And yeah, I'm just continuing to teach them because I grew up really connected just through my dad.
No, that's amazing. So you mentioned skinning kangaroos. This is totally off topic, but have you eaten kangaroo tail?
No,
is that?
No.
Okay.
The amount of kangaroo insides that come out of a kangaroo once you've skinned it, I'm like, that would not fit if we tried to put it back in. It is disgusting, the amount of intestines. So definitely not ever trying kangaroo ever. Yeah, no, because I know kangaroo was like kangaroo tail when there was sorry business and stuff happening up in the community I worked in, was like a big thing. Yeah. And I'm vegetarian, so I was like, can't try it, but yeah. Yeah, crazy.
No. It's interesting to see like the two different ways of doing it. Like when you skin it, you're not eating it, are you? You're using the fur and the skin.
Well, the boys did eat the meat before it was on the barbecue accidentally.
Oh.
Yeah, just think of like little like 6-year-old boys like literally squeezing it in the blood, and I was like, so my sister was also vegetarian. I still don't eat red meat. Yeah, because of that. It was pretty gross.
I can imagine. I feel like we become so detached from like where our food comes from.
Yes.
But no, that's really remarkable and great that you had like that cultural upbringing, because I think like, I guess colonization has really impacted that. So not everyone is as lucky to grow up in that way. I guess I want to move on to taking up space as an Indigenous woman and what kind of opportunities Western society presents to you. Have you ever had to take up space that like wasn't designed for you, and what kind of was that experience like?
Yeah, I feel like it's something that's really interesting because and at my the organisation I was working at, there was a lot of senior people that were women and were really pushing kind of the agenda of equality and women's rights. And then I was like, imagine being an Aboriginal woman. And they kind of didn't get it. And it was a really interesting conversation because I just don't think a lot of people, particularly in this area, like understand a lot of things. Like I was at the NAIDOC March 2020, and someone said, can we interview you for a podcast, I don't know what it was called, and I said sure, and then he asked me a question. I thought it would be like of a supportive question, and it really wasn't. And he was like, do you think there's such thing as discrimination against white people? And I was really like and that ended up going viral on TikTok, and it was a really interesting conversation because I was like, no. Like I don't think there is. And then we got to talking about my role, and my job was to help employ Aboriginal people across the stores. It was one of the bigger retailers in the country, and it was my job to help employ Aboriginal people in the stores. And then there were some people that said, well, they don't need help being employed. And I said, you really don't understand just the statistics. Like they don't, and this is a generalisation. I don't like to talk about what we don't have as a community, but they might not have someone to help them do their resume, or, how do we then make the process so that, and, we needed a mobile phone number. Well, some people didn't have mobile phone numbers. Well, they couldn't get to interviews, or like different things that people were just so out of touch and didn't understand that not every 15-year-old doesn't have an iPhone. Yeah. And it was really interesting to then just understand the payment, and can the payment not go, if they don't have a bank account, can it go to their parents' bank account? And as a organisation, they're like, well, this is the policy. And it was like, well, we need to change the policy because a lot of Aboriginal kids, particularly Aboriginal kids, their money that they're earning isn't pocket money, it's rent. Yeah. And not a lot of corporates even understood that. Even once they'd employed those Aboriginal people. And it's just a different way of community because, if their kid had a job, that money's not going to their parents. It's really different. And not to say one or the other is better, but it's just, having now worked in that space, it kind of really made me understand how privileged some people are without knowing it, and also how much support some people did need. And if it was me sitting on an interview, or what do I wear to my interview, where do I buy shoes from, because I didn't have those things, which, it was just like a completely different recruitment process, which we eventually established a really good recruitment process. But to get to that point, it was a lot of conversations because people just didn't understand. Yeah. And I guess that's also just in the broader community, whether it be sport or, I know that a lot of schools now have scholarships for Aboriginal kids who you go to their schools so they can excel in their sport because they don't have that stress of home and those other things, and those programs that, like Scotch Grammar, Melbourne Grammar, all of those schools do, they're amazing and they are really important because, those people need that lack of stress to be able to succeed. And it's something that a lot of Aboriginal kids, we do grow up different, very different. And how are we supposed to succeed in this Western society if we're still living, so differently? But there's such easy, simple ways, but some people think they're being discriminated against by not getting the support, but they don't get the whole need for that support. So,
I think a lot of people don't realise how detached they can become from Indigenous people and how their upbringing can be different. And I guess on that, do you have any recommendations on what non-Indigenous people can do to further support Indigenous people and the continuation of culture and meeting them where they're at?
Yeah, I mean, from a professional a professional view, I would say that more so the adults, your business probably has a reconciliation action plan. Sure, you've got a rap group and somebody whose job it is to support with that, but that's a whole business commitment. It's not just that group of people. There are very simple ways that you can engage within the stuff your work is doing, because if you do work for a big organisation, I know that they're doing things, and if they're not, how are you how are you then saying, well, what can we be doing during NAIDOC week or reconciliation week? And there are 2 weeks a year that you should be doing something. I think you should be doing something every week of the year, but that's just my opinion. But how do you then further support that or call your organisation out if they've got a rap and they're not doing anything? Because I think a lot of corps at that top level get away with not doing much, and at the end of the day, it's kind of not good enough. From a personal perspective, I would say it's having that conversation within your families, your community. It's looking at First Nations, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, Indigenous, whatever you would like to call, that category of people. What are you doing to further support the artists, the musicians, the athletes, whatever it may be? People always ask what footy team I go for. I don't go for a footy team, I go for players. And that's a really weird concept to people because I just go for the Aboriginal players. That's, that's the way that I've been raised. My dad would probably say the same. How are you as an ally then supporting, during particularly those 2 big weeks, how are you celebrating an artist or sharing their content, or if there are Aboriginal creators out there that you really align with, how are you boosting them up? And I know that as a broader society and country, we don't boost people up. I don't know why. It's a bit tragic the way that Australian society likes to jump on the downfall of people. But, how do we kind of change that and get, influencers and all these bigger people with bigger platforms, to raise awareness to these bigger issues?
I think a lot of people think allyship is just a title that you can give yourself for doing one thing to kind of support the community, but it's actually an ongoing commitment. So do you put measures in place to ensure your collaborations, when you are working with businesses, that it's not tokenistic, that it's not just ticking the box for those 2 weeks of the year? Yep. It's definitely a process that I go through, and it's quite easy for me to just kind of straight away be able to identify if people are authentic or not, not only as people, but, as a business. And some businesses do reach out to me and they want to collaborate, but they don't have an acknowledgement on their website. And it's just kind of me as a person, or my friends would like to say, I recommend things all the time, whether it be my personal life, professional life.
And I'll just go back to them and say, like, sure, here are some things that I'd like you to do, and that's an acknowledgement in your emails, because they just don't know. Mm-hmm. And if some organisations don't have someone in Indigenous affairs, or they don't have a rap, then how are they supposed to know that these things are really important? And that's something I'm getting better at posting on my Instagram, just basic education, because I also just assume people have the same knowledge I have. So I'm trying to support the businesses I work with as well in like an informal consulting way. And I don't have to do that, but I want to, because I want them from that point of view to not look tokenistic, because that's what Aboriginal people then jump on, and they'll say, well, they don't have this, they don't have that, but they've got an Aboriginal range. And I've grown up a bit different. I see things a little bit more in the glass as half full rather than half empty. So I just try and educate to support the business, because if I know their mind and heart's in the right place, then I want to support them. Sure, it's not my job. It's my job to do a painting. It's not my job to consult them, but I want to. And you form really good relationships with the people that you do collaborations with, because you speak to them so often, especially for the bigger collaborations. There are so many meetings, like weekly meetings for 6 months. And, you do form a really big bond with them, so you want to help them as well.
I think it speaks volumes about your character that you're willing to take on that education role for like the benefit of community, and giving them the chance to correct their behavior rather than being like, you're being tokenistic, like I'm not going to engage. And I think that's so like valuable and like a great skill of yours. So props to you for that. And like leading into that, how does it feel to know that you're recognized as someone like teaching future generations about culture, about community, how to do better, and also just like keeping Indigenous artwork alive?
Yeah, it's really cool. I feel like there was no, like when I was young, we would go to galleries, and now knowing galleries and the structure of galleries, I'm like, so people are always like, you're going to go in a gallery? I'm like, no. Like they keep so much of the profit, and I find that most people that own galleries that I've had interactions with is just not authentic whatsoever. So I just like, no. But it's really cool now because there are creators, whether it be me or somebody else. There are lots of other artists on socials. Like I never had that when I was younger. So it is really cool to be able to play a role in making people feel more confident in their culture. I often get messaged by young Aboriginal people on Instagram just wanting support. How do I do my pricing? And like I reply, of course I'm going to reply. Yeah. Like it's not, even if it got to the point of a competitor, like at the end of the day, like Aboriginal people want other Aboriginal people to succeed. And when people do ask me how would you summarise like the feeling of being Aboriginal, I always say there are two things. First thing is like just an instant respect for the land you're on and the country you're from. And just like, I guess this whole sustainability, broader topic, it's just like so much kind of like deeper in you. And then also like wanting any other Aboriginal people to succeed. Like if you're in a workplace and someone else is Aboriginal, you're instantly like connected to that Aboriginal person. And yeah, I think that to be able to help other Aboriginal people kind of live up to their dream, whether it's an artist or work in Indigenous affairs, I feel like that's really cool to be able to be that person for someone.
I think it's such a beautiful like sense of community, and knowing that like I guess for young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people out there who might be listening and like struggling or wanting to pursue something different or wanting to pursue like sport or art or anything like that, it's good to know that there's people in community that they can turn to, and everyone there just like wants to see them succeed. Yeah. So I think that's really beautiful. And it's like so impressive to know that like you're doing so much work on your own, like art, you're pushing other people up, you're doing advocacy. I know you're teaching like you're going out to schools and running programs, and I know you're also on the literacy
the ALNF ambassador.
So much incredible work that you're out there doing. That is kind of all I have for questions. I guess, is there anything else you want to add or
No. I think the one piece of advice I would give any young person, or just any person in general, and it's something, again, that I was never taught, is that you have to practice. Like sport, you're not going to make the rep team unless you're training and you're playing lots of sport, and music's the same, like you've got to practice. And art is the exact same, if not more, because there's no perfect in art. Like sport, you're going to kick a goal, score a goal. Like that's the end goal. But art, it's so subjective because of how different it is. So my advice would just be to practice, and that you might not love everything you do, but at the end of the day, like I am more of an orange pink girl, which you might know by my artwork, and my sister's like a blue girl, like blue, turquoise, greens. We've got she'll always go, oh my God, like I don't love that. And I'm like, that's my favourite piece. And we're always vice versa. We are very honest with each other, but it's always really interesting because if I didn't have her, I'd question a lot of things. So, you know, if there's a young artist without a sister out there, to be brutally honest, or a little bit the opposite, like, don't be strict on yourself with art. There is no perfect. It's just kind of your idea of what you're creating, and just really keep practicing.
Yeah. No, amazing advice. For anyone listening, Bayley has an incredible website where you can commission pieces.
Yes.
You can buy pieces. She's already made. There's apparel, and I know she's also doing some amazing other collaborations. Casetify.
Yep. Colouring in book.
Colouring
really
in
cool.
book, Yarn Marketplace. You've got a few things on there. So check out Bayley's artwork. There's plenty of like amazing products to buy, and follow her on Instagram. And thank you so much for coming down. This has been an amazing first episode, and I personally have learnt so much, like hearing your story and talking to you, and I hope everyone else. It's been really valuable.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.